review is based on the methodology of previous authors, right? So the narrative will be about different methods, and in this case, I start with ex ante and explain the different methodologies, right? So another thing to note, well, I start talking about averted future impact studies, and here I put in parentheses a list of studies. These are just examples, all right? I didn't read all those studies. As I mentioned, what you have to do is that you search the papers and you get the information that you need. Mm-hmm. So in this case, I search for the paper and I know that all these studies, in parentheses here, use the methodology of averted future impact studies. And that information, you probably get it only from the abstract. So again, read efficiently. You don't need to read the entire papers. That's the information that I needed to get, and I got it, right? And I include the paper as a reference if the reader wants to go and look for a study using that methodology. And the same when it comes to stated preference studies. I include a list of articles using that methodology. Again, I didn't read them all. I just ensured myself that those papers were using that methodology. Mm-hmm. And I put them as example. Now, then I focus my discussion on the averted future impact method, and you will see why. So far, everything is descriptive. I'm just giving a structure to the literature, and I'm just describing. We have different methodologies, and this is the, and then I will start explaining the AFI method. There's no criticism so far. You cannot say this is critical. I'm just giving a structure to the literature and somehow telling the story, right? So let's continue. The AFI method constitutes the current standard approach for assessing the economic benefits of flood alleviation schemes. So I wanted to highlight that this first methodology is the one that is the standard, but in general what they use. And I will then come and say what are the criticisms, right? And there I highlight that, okay, that's the standard methodology, the standard approach, and it has important criticism. So let's go scroll down on the literature. And I continue describing the methodology, right? The main inputs to that AFI, because if you want to say criticism about it, there has to be some description, as I mentioned in the videos. There's always need to be some description, but not pure description. So I need to explain what the AFI method is about. Otherwise, you cannot understand my arguments, right? So I spend a paragraph describing, and then let's move on to the criticism, right? Although this methodology is widely used for the economic assessment of flood defense projects, it is nevertheless subject to some important shortcomings. So now I'm gonna introduce the criticism, and I'm gonna say what are the problems related with this methodology and why we should be discussing if this is the appropriate method. Mm-hmm. And in one of the previous sessions, one of the students asked, now, do we have to include our own criticism, or should we include the criticism of someone else? Well, you can do both, right? Just make sure that if you are including the criticism that someone else wrote, make sure you acknowledge that idea, you acknowledge where the idea is coming from. Mm-hmm. So if you see the criticism, it says, the extent that the household would indeed make the repairs of replacement suggested. That is an idea, it's a criticism of this methodology, and it's an idea I took from Shasman and Stephenson, 1996. And of course, I read that entire paper, and you will see why. And that's one piece of criticism. Second, the fact that the estimates do not necessarily correspond to willingness to pay, which is just a term in economics, right? But then this is an idea of my own, then this has no reference. There is also concern that the predictive ability of those models is weak. Again, this is an idea or discussion I took from another author. Mm-hmm. So this is the third piece of criticism. Then fourth, it is also causing most impacts associated with construction of defenses other than those resulting from the probability of flood. So I am grouping the criticism. So now it is not only a description of the previous methods and what other authors did. There's also some criticism, some discussion of the literature. And then I start talking about the stated preference models, which is just when they ask people. It provides an alternative means of estimating economic benefits of flood alleviation schemes. And then I discuss what this stated preference method is about and who have done that. I will now include criticism about both of these methodologies because this is the other methodology, the other approach, right? So both of these methodologies, the AEFI and the SPM, provide an ex-ante assessment of the benefit of constructing the flood defenses. So they estimate the benefits before the construction of the defense. And of course, one of my main criticisms in this paper, wait, I see that the screen is a bit behind. Yeah. One of the main criticisms in my paper is that despite the increasingly large amounts of money spent on planning and construction of flood defenses, surprisingly little research exists providing an ex post evaluation of the benefits delivered by flood defenses, right? So I'm gonna do an ex post evaluation. Those are estimates that are before the construction, but we need to know if the benefits that we get are actually the ones we anticipated. And now I'm getting to the most relevant literature, right? I already talked about ex-ante studies, which were somehow related, but not the most relevant one. Now I'm gonna focus on what is the most relevant literature, which are ex-post studies, because that's exactly what I do, right? So let's look at previous ex-post studies. Of those studies investigating ex-post benefits, then the first one that we have, it's Damianos and Chapman. So it's a relevant paper. I read it fully. And then I also discussed a paper by Thompson and Stovener, 1983. This is just a description of what the authors did. And notice that at this point, I start describing papers in more detail because those studies are more related to what I'm doing. So you need to spend more time on them. Now, the description is still short because these are very old studies from 1976 and 1983. So I think that they are not as relevant. I prefer to spend more time discussing the more recent evidence. Right? So let's continue. There's a more recent study by Lian Li in 2009, and then I explained in detail what this study by Lian Li is about, what they did, what results they got, etc. And then I come up to criticize these previous ex-post studies. That's the literature I'm looking at. That's where my contribution is. So the problem is that these ex-post studies clearly suffer from significant shortcomings. And I explain what the shortcomings are. In some cases, I take some ideas from previous authors or discuss specific articles. So there is a criticism, there is more discussion, and then let's go to the last paragraph of my literature review, because you have to put your study into context with previous literature, right? This is an empirical work, so I'm going to build a model, but even if you are building arguments in an essay, you need to put your arguments into context with previous literature. So let's just go through this paragraph. And then I come back to the work by Lian Li. And I note that these authors got some negative impacts associated with the construction of flood defenses. So some authors got a negative result, suggesting that the construction of flood defenses is not positive for them, but negative. And the argument is that they cause disruption in the environment. So some people actually feel affected by having the defense. They would rather be without the defense, right? And I just want to highlight that Lian Li is not the only author. Phillips, 2011, they found something similar, and there are similar arguments from Penning-Rouseville and Forham in 1994. So I just close this by saying that Penning-Rouseville et al. Argue that there is an important trade-off for households between flood protection and the preservation of amenity values, which is this idea that some are actually better off without the defense. And just to put my work into context, I just close by saying The results that we will go on to present appear to support this contestation. So meaning that the results that I will show also find some negative impacts associated with the construction of flood defenses, right? So you want to show the reader that you are not the only one getting this unexpected result, and this is actually something that has already come up in the literature. So with this, wait. With this, I finished the session. That was the last part of my discussion. Just want to highlight that, remember, this is a skill that you will develop as you continue with your studies. You will be writing a lot of essay. And the idea, or my idea, I guess, for this session was to help you, to try to show you what we expect from you. And I really hope this session was useful for you, especially because if you are not already, you will probably you're going to start writing your first essay, if not this week, probably next month, right? So please consider everything I mentioned in this session. If you have a question at some point, again, my preferred choice is if you can post it on the discussion board. If you don't want, then send me an email and we can discuss. So with that, I guess I just let the microphone to Joe and Camila just to ask if there is anything you would like to ask. Sorry, anything you would like to ask?
Nothing further. Thank you, Alan. It was really very good session. I sometimes wish our students who are writing or who will be writing their final year projects would benefit again from such a skill session, just to remind them of how to write a literature review. Thank you. That was really very good. I don't have anything to add, Joe.
No, I don't either. So I've listened to this 3 times now. Obviously, I listened to the first one more than today's, as you can imagine. But yeah, I thought it was a good session. I thought it was really useful. I hope people have made notes and listened to what Alan said.
Have you tried the paella, by the way?
Yeah, it's good. It's really good.
It looks good. Well. Thank you very much, guys. I'm going for I'm going for lunch. Now I feel really hungry. I hope you enjoyed.
Bon appetit.
Yeah, bon appetit. That's a good